his brain is one supercomputer. His memory is photographic, and I guess he's kind of photogenic too. Ari Alexander, KPRC Sports Guru in Houston, is with us. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio. Also, Ari is known as Rari if you go to a Memphis Grizzlies game. Is that true, Ari?
Yeah, there was a shooting outside of the stadium actually that 1 week, and they were putting down some security measures, and we had to if you remember, all the time we would go in, didn't have to sign in or do anything, just security guys recognize us, but for a few weeks we had to sign in and put our names, give us little name tags, and the security guard could not just comprehend that ARI was a name, and so he thought my name was R-E-R period E period, and he started writing that, and he wrote an R on my name tag, and I was like, no, it's A-R-I, and so he thought I was adding that on, so I had to walk around Grizzlies practice in a name tag that said Rari for like 2 days in a row.
Well, and you owned up to it. It actually was a nice compliment to your name. I think you should have rolled with it a little bit further. And
yeah, I have a few friends that still call me that, but now I'm just really going anywhere.
By the way, you can follow Ari on Twitter, and it is Ari Alexander, except the L is a 1. So all one word, Ari Alexander. The L is a 1. And Ari, look, one of the things I love about you is how creative you are when you're doing your sportscasts, and you're an outside-the-box thinker. So give us some examples of how you do really dive into being creative, because I see it with your integration of hip-hop lyrics, or that one piece you did where you had like yourself in the 1940s when you're talking about the unwritten rules in baseball. So where does all of this, the genesis of all these great thoughts and unique ideas come from?
I just think that today there's, sportscasting, and just the way that sports stories are told has gotten so competitive. And I mean, because of the internet, you can find anything done however many different ways. And so it's not like 20, 30 years ago where, you read highlights straight and you tell you what happened and that's good enough. That's no longer good enough. And I think the people that came up in that era, the sportscasters that came up in that era, are now struggling to differentiate themselves from, a generation that has always had to compete with the internet existing. And so for me, it's just that I'm very competitive, and what can I add, or what can I think of that no one else can think of? It's something that I talk about, younger sportscasters reach out and want advice. And my biggest piece of advice is figure out what you do that is better than everyone else. And so that's, because in such a small business where there are so few jobs, you have to do something that you're better at than everyone else. And so for me, I believe that's, the creativity, or the way that to take something that seems outside of the box and connect it to where people can understand it on a very basic level. And so, for your examples that you gave, so I grew up listening to hip hop, and, I, ever since I was younger, Forgot About Dre was like my favorite song. I was 8, 9 years old. Right. And my brother got the Dr. Dre 2001 CD, and we'd sit up in our room with our little race car carpet and our bunk bed and listen to this Dr. Dre album. And then, we got a little older, and 50 Cent in 2003 came out with Get Rich or Die Trying. I was 12 in 2003. And, you grow up listening to gangster rap, being, a 12-year-old white kid in Iowa, but I would spend every summer in New York, and, 50 Cent's from Queens, and we'd drive by and I'm like, oh, look, that's the hospital, 50 Cent was in after he got shot. And so you see these kind of like hip hop landmarks, and you grew up listening to this music. And then again, same thing with, you grew up with the internet, and you see how much of hip hop culture is ingrained in sports, and how using that to connect to people helps them not only better understand just, the general side of it, the plays and the stats and all that stuff, but also helps them understand the stories and the connection. You have athletes that constantly post rap lyrics or whatever on their Instagram stories, but they don't just do that, it's 3 p.m., got to post a rap lyric. No, like there's some sort of meaning behind it to these guys. And if you can connect on a meaningful level with them there, I think that helps you tell the better story. So for me, it's just, and also it's fun. Like I love doing the DMX growl and on that, but So that's one way. And then on the 1940s thing, I do like to, as we say on Twitter, dunk on the olds. And so that's just kind of my way of making fun of people who, like, baseball is dying. Less kids are playing baseball these days. Baseball used to be the premier sport, and baseball struggles to market like football and basketball, which are two great at marketing sports, and baseball isn't. And so that's kind of my way of telling, today's audience is that you are stuck in 1940 if you think baseball needs to be played like it used to.
You did that Kanye West Sportscast theme where I think you had 39 references from songs that you used.
Yeah, on his 39th birthday.
Okay. How long did it take you to plan all this out? And so, because I just listened to it again yesterday, Ari, and I was like, it didn't look forced. Like, I could tell that was you injecting your personality, but whenever you used a reference, it actually fit. So how long did it take you to script that thing?
Less than 3 hours.
Wow.
I decided, 6 p.m., 10 p.m. newscast. I was thinking about doing it throughout the day, but I didn't really write anything. I was just like, maybe I'll do it at 10, maybe not, whatever. I got done with my 6 o'clock news at 6:30. I typically go home for my dinner break. When I was living in Tucson, I lived about 5 minutes away from the TV station. So I'd run home and eat something, and I was sitting eating dinner, watching basketball. And I was like, you know what, I'll do it. So at about 7, I kind of started writing down little, just looking up like some, list of songs, list of lyrics, like what can I fit in here? And so I got back to, after dinner and started writing, and it flows relatively naturally. I mean, I think I got through maybe 30 out of the 39 without having to look up much stuff. And then the last few, I was like, okay, how do I fit this in here to make sure I have exactly 39? I did a Lady Gaga themed one for Super Bowl 51 where I had 51 Lady Gaga references, and that was a little tougher. The first time that anyone ever did this, and it always upset me because I didn't have the opportunity. I felt like I could have done it first if I wasn't 19 years old, right? So Adam Lefkoe, who's now with Turner, he had this various 3 or 4 different sportscasts that had these references. There was a Seinfeld one, there was a wrestling one, there was a hip hop one. And so I was like, the Seinfeld one, great job, Adam. Wrestling one, great job. You're pro wrestling. I know pro wrestling a little bit, but not to the level that he does Mazel Tov. And he did the hip hop one, and I was upset. And I was like, this is my thing. And he did a great job with it, but I'm like, this is my thing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if I wasn't 19 years old, a sophomore in college right now, I would have done this. And so I wanted to do it a little different way. The way that he did it, it was just kind of how many references can I get in here? How many different various across hip hop? It was a very wide approach. And so that's where I was like, if I'm going to do this, it's going to be extremely specific. And there's going to be a specific number or whatever to hit where you can see that that everything's very targeted. And so that was for Kanye's birthday. It was his 39th birthday. I was like, okay, I'm going to do exactly 39. It's not as many as I can think of. It's exactly this number. And so that's kind of, if I ever do that again, it'll be something like that where I'm hitting a certain number.
Also, and Ari, I noticed that you did this reciting of the Heisman names from way back in the day. And that's the thing I alluded to earlier, is that not only are you creative, but your memory is photographic. You were on the air not long ago, and I think, what was it you did? You started from 19, whenever the Heisman Trophy Award started, and you literally just recited off the top of your head every Heisman winner from there. What is it about your mind, man, that you can soak up this information and it just stays present?
So it's not me necessarily. I think part of it is, so that's what education was like in the Soviet Union. So my mom had to, when we took tests, right? We grew up in the US. We took tests, and you write down your answers on a piece of paper, write essays or whatever. In Russia and the Soviet Union, it's oral exams. So you have to memorize everything and talk to the professor and tell them what you know. And so that's how my mom grew up. And so when I was very little, I was kind of taught like that by my parents, that you should be able to memorize everything. And then if we spot quiz you in the car on a road trip, you should know it off the top of your head.
Yeah.
So I did that with the presidents too. I know every president and what years they were president, because when I was a little kid, I had a placemat that I'd eat my waffles at when I was, that had the presidents. And so somehow that just came to memory. And we'd be at the mall with my parents, and my dad would randomly be like, hey, who's the 27th president? And I'd just be like, all right. So that's where the kind of photographic memory comes in. Is I think of the placemat. All right, okay. fat guy. William Howard Taft, and then Taft's after Roosevelt. When was Roosevelt president? 01 to 09. So Taft would have been 09 to 13. So, and it's the same thing with the Heisman. And, with memory tricks like that, you have a little jumping off point. So I know Iowa's 1939 with Mal Kinnick. I know, various numbers. And so if there's one that I can't think of, it's just, what do I know? Okay, I know 48 Stoke Walker. I know 49's Leon Hart. I know the 44 and 45 is the two Army guys, but then so who's 46 and 47, right? And so you just think of, in between, and then it helps fill that in. I did that because Bomani Jones did it for like a period of 30 or 40 years. And so a lot of this comes from competitiveness. So it's like, okay, this guy did 40 years, I can do better.
Taking a trip in Ari's mind would be an auction item that would go for a lot of money. Follow Ari on Twitter at Ari Alexander. Again, the L in Alexander is a 1. He is a superstar in Houston at KPRC. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio. I'm on Twitter at Bryan Fenley. You spoke about Iowa. You are an Iowa native. Yes. We actually have a guy who works with us who does this little Iowa Minute. He's a big Hawkeye fan. You two would hit it off. His name is Iowa Sam, or that's what he goes by on the radio. Yeah. Take me through what it was like being a young Ari. You wanted to get in the business. You wanted a head start. So what were you doing early on to try to put yourself in the right position?
So I didn't really necessarily know that I wanted to do TV. So originally I did print. We had a newspaper. I'm from Kelowna, Iowa, which is a very, very small town, 2,500 population. There's a cat behind me. Sorry, it's our cat, Henry.
Oh, cool.
It's a very small town, 2,500 population, not a lot going on. And we had a newspaper, right? It's a small newspaper, 3,000 circulation that goes around to Kelowna, the surrounding area. There are Amish people that subscribe to the newspaper. So my dad wanted me to get out of the house and have some sort of part-time job when I turned 14, as you do in Iowa. And so he asked the owner of the newspaper if I could do anything around there. And so they, I think, just needed someone to answer phones and help out around and whatever. And so that's what I did for the summer. And then eventually the sports editor of this small newspaper needed some help. So he'd send me out to go to a, 1A high school softball game or whatever and write a quick little wrap up. And then, eventually he would take a week off and, hey, can you handle these 3 or 4 high school baseball games or whatever. So I would go and do this and then help out. And then eventually the next year I would have been 15 and I was writing stuff and then started at a radio station. So I did radio and it was an oldies station in Washington, Iowa, which is another small town of like 8,000 people. And I was a DJ at the oldies radio station for, 5-hour shifts and then still working at the newspaper. And then my sophomore year, high school football, I was, I didn't play football because I'm not very big. They were like, you know what, let's have you write about the game, because we have a game story, but then we don't have anything in depth and you're there every game. And so I had my own column called Between the Tackles, my sophomore year about the high school football team. And like, I didn't pull punches, right? These are my classmates. So they would get pissed if I criticized them. I would be like, look, guys, you lost 42-34, defensive breakdowns by the linebackers and the guys who are linebackers who all outweigh me by 40 pounds would be like, what the hell, man?
Yeah.
And I would be like, were there not defensive breakdown, guys? I know I'm going to see you in math class, but make your tackles. So then I did that all throughout high school, got more and more responsibilities in the newspaper. My junior year, the Iowa City Press Citizen, which was the, bigger kind of area newspaper, they reached out and had me do some high school coverage. I did KXNO radio in Des Moines, needed an Eastern Iowa guy. And they'd pay me $25 a week. So Friday nights I would drive to Iowa City or Cedar Rapids and go to some high school football game and do a call-in report on what was going on in the game under a fake name. So Ari Alexander is not my real name. I'm not going to divulge the rest, but I'm Russian. So I have a very unpronounceable Russian name. And so I went by Jason Dodge. I think you're the first. There you go. The Bryan Fenley podcast. The first person to know that before I was Ari Alexander, I was for a short time Jason Dodge.
Wow. Breaking news on the podcast. I love it. And I want to keep calling you that unless you don't want me to.
I don't remember why that was what it was, but yeah, I had a little name tag that I made, a fake press pass that I would go into these high school games, said Jason Dodge, KXNO radio. By the way, that is how easy it is to make a press pass to get into high school games. So please don't do that because
yeah.
But and then I made one for my buddy who wanted to come with me, and he was Tim Walsh. His name's Frank. not Tim Walsh.
Yeah.
But I don't know. So it was like a stupid high school thing. But like, yeah, I'd get $25 check every week from this, from Cumulus Radio to call in and be like, hey, Scott Schebler, who is now a Reds outfielder, or I think he got traded, caught a touchdown pass for Cedar Rapids Prairie over Iowa City West, and then I went to college at Mizzou and decided, and I don't know if your radio guys will agree with this. This is my controversial take.
Okay.
I think that out of all of the mediums in sports media, TV is the hardest. I think TV, and you've done TV.
Yeah.
TV takes the most things that you have to put together. If you're in print, you have to be able to write well and report. If you're in radio, you have to be able to talk well and write and whatever. In TV, you have to do all of those things while shooting video or doing stuff for video and looking good.
Yeah.
And so I think that if you're good on TV, you can do radio. If you're good on TV, you can write well enough for TV. There's a lot of guys in TV that can't write, but if you write well enough for TV, you can do print. Whereas it's hard to transition from print to TV because sometimes there's some print guys that should not be on TV. There's radio guys that's why face for radio.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you can do TV, you can do the other ones. And I kind of wanted to do everything. And so when I went to college, it was, if I can master doing TV, I can, someone will let me do radio, or I can do print again if I ever wanted to.
Yeah, I can see that because of the whole visual presentation, the whole superficial aspect of being on television that on radio you don't have to worry about, and the whole makeup and dealing with that. And like you said, you're filming.
It's harder than you think. Like there's all sorts, everyone thinks that, the delivery and the presentation's the hard part of TV. And sometimes it's just like looking at the right camera. Yeah. And like, that is a skill to just have your attention to knowing that, okay, so I'm on this camera here for now, but then when we go to a 2-box and the reporter's in the field, I got to look over here, then I got to go back here, but then my monitor's here. And it's just like little things that I think is more detail. And I've done radio. And so I can say that I've done radio, I've done print. And I think there's just more to TV.
Yeah, and like, the simple things as well, like, your haircut, is your shirt tucked in, this stuff you don't have to think about if you're doing print and
classic Bryan Fenley, is your shirt tucked in? No.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I've learned over the years that, it's probably a good idea to tuck the shirt in once in a while. And look, yeah, like you said, there's a lot of guys that are on radio and they have a face for radio, and somehow they found a woman in their life. All right, so
you like still have the skater shoes, by the way?
No, those are in the Hall of Fame.
Bryan, for the Fenley fanatics, I don't know if you guys know about these. The classic Bryan Fenley look at a Memphis Grizzlies or a Memphis Tigers press conference is the 2 sizes too big suit jacket, shirt untucked into large dress pants with black like skater Vans that like Tony Hawk's son would get handed down.
That is true. And one of the first criticisms I got after my Memphis days was somebody looked at me and said, "What are you wearing?" As Ari would say, "What are those?" That's what are these?
Big, what are those?
Yeah. So it was an ultimate wake up call, and thank goodness I don't do that unless I do. But hopefully I'll learn moving forward. So you went to Mizzou, great college for sportscasting. Obviously, we met in Memphis. You dominated in Tucson, and now you're in Houston. And like all of us in the business, Ari, you deal with rejection. Your story is one of persistence and one of like, I will do whatever it takes to get there. I don't care if somebody says I can't do it. I will find a way. What are ways in which you took the extremes to say, I am going to make it? I am going to overcome rejection. And how did that help you ultimately break through to where you are now?
I don't know if it's a way of doing anything. I just think that you have to be able to some degree, be a little bulletproof. And I think my whole thing works. And, for anyone who's watching this, I feel like it looks like I have plenty of confidence in what I do. And I think that's part of it. And if you don't have confidence, especially where I come from, to try to get away with all these things, referencing, hip hop on TV all the time, or doing all the, I think everything that I do comes from a place of, will this work? And I believe this will work. And I do all sorts of these things that I feel like other people might not be able to get away with because the confidence is just there. I go into every outrageous or whatever, like people will say it's ridiculous or outrageous, and to me it's just whatever, because I truly believe that I can make it work all the time. Like and I would say that's 99% of how I am, but there is a 1% that sometimes you doubt yourself and you think, maybe I can't do it. And so there are days like that where, and I posted this on LinkedIn or a couple other places on Twitter where I was like, look, if you're a young sportscaster and you're struggling, reach out and I'll see what I can help. And real critiques is one thing, that's kind of what everyone does, but there's a lot of stuff that goes into doing TV or getting a job in TV or whatever, or radio or anything that is not just like how good you are. A lot of going in is not you. It's how can you get in the room, right? It's,
Yes.
If you watch Hamilton, you want to be in the room where it happens, right?
Yeah.
How do you get in the room? And that's something that's not taught in college. Doesn't matter what like great university you go to. You can go to Mizzou, you can go to Syracuse, Northwestern, all these places, and they don't tell you about the connections. All you know is, it's who you know. But that's it. There's no explanation of why. And so that's part of where one thing that I think I had to learn as I got older is that, I fully trust and believe that I can do the job at any level. The talent is not an issue for me. It's the, who do you know? How can you leverage connections? And so that was one thing that I think that took longer for me to learn than it should have, or at least it could have. And so that was one thing that was difficult is I would get upset. I'd send out an application. I was working in Memphis and not making a lot of money, and I wanted to go somewhere where, I would have a living wage basically. Yeah. Right.
Sure.
And have an opportunity to be on air more. And I ended up landing in Tucson, but I would send out my reel to these places that I thought that I could work in, or I would do my research. And, as you know, I'm competitive, and I would see all the other sportscasters in that market and be like, I'm better than all these people. And it wouldn't get a response back. And it would, it'd make me upset. And it's like, why? And it's just because they don't know anything about me, Here, Vegas, I'll give us an example, right? It's if from a market standpoint, it's a mid-sized market. They are now starting to get pro sports, but now I work in Houston, and I was in Tucson. I'd reach out to these Vegas stations, and they just didn't care. Yeah. Well, why? Could it be that I'm not good enough? No, probably not, right? Or at least I don't think so. It's probably just that they don't know anything about me. I don't have any sort of connection to there or anything like that. And so that's one thing, is that you have to kind of believe in yourself, that if you are rejected or if some place doesn't email you back, that, could it be that you need to improve at something? Possibly. There's plenty of stuff I can still improve on. Or is it, that you need to find some sort of way to connect with them, or is it both? And so I think that's one thing where, and I put in that note to, to younger kids, they want to reach out. Here's a list of 60 places that rejected me, that said no. And then I still, kept sending stuff out. There's all these, cover letter for whatever state. It was even KVOA, the station that I worked for in Tucson. They had a job opening in college, when I was in college, rather, when I graduated, and they didn't even get back to me. I gave my news director crap about that all the time. Remember when you didn't even get me back, and then you hired me, and then I won you every award you could win? So I think you just have to be persistent. And there is a point too, I think, to get out of the business is a point too, where you choose happiness over grinding it out and trying to get to your goal. And I think that there's something to be said for doing that. But at some point, you cannot stay down. You get knocked, as Tub Thumping said, you get knocked down and then you get up again.
That's right, man. That is certainly the case. And Ari Alexander is with us. Follow him on Twitter, Ari Alexander. The L is a 1 on Twitter. Got to make sure we get that in. Although he wishes he had it, just the
$600. That's the cost.
Yeah, you offered the guy who has that, and he's being.
Well, no, I offered him something reasonable. I would have gone up to $250. I would have paid up to $250. He wanted $600. The guy's in Indonesia. Doesn't use his Twitter account ever, but has @Ari Alexander. And he wanted $600. Are you kidding me? I looked up the exchange rate. You know how much $600 would go for in Indonesia? I've been in 2 countries where the exchange rate is strong toward the US dollar. Mm-hmm. So Egypt, it's 20-1. Mexico, it's roughly 20-1. You know how far $600 goes in Egypt? It would go so far in Indonesia. Yeah. Are you kidding me?
Yeah. Well, you do as good as you can, and I think it works. By the way, Ari, I love what you said because a lot of it too is like you mentioned the whole networking aspect, but it's also there's such a science or shall I say an art to how you write these emails, how you reach out, how you word them can go a long way. And I look at it from my perspective, what's helped me is like it's not about me necessarily, and it's more about building up a relationship. Like if I'm reaching out, I'm learning now that I don't want to just it's not like ordering food. Like I'm reaching out, but I'm there first and foremost to build a relationship. And if it prospers into opportunities in the future, that's great. But I'm not like just solely reaching out to say Ari Alexander and saying, hey, what's open right now? Like I want to get to know Ari. I want to get to know him. I want to build up that relationship. And over time, perhaps there are benefits that can help both of us out. But again, I think we have to look at it more of a long-term picture, in my opinion, as far as creating those relationships, which can lead to great opportunities like you have as well. So the Houston sports fan, you've had
Yes.
a chance to get the heartbeat of what they're all about. What would you do to characterize them?
I would say the Houston sports fan is a bit aggrieved. So you have a football franchise, right? Football's everything in
Mhm.
Texas. You have a football team. So first I'm rocking Swisha House. This is
Look
a
at
famous
you.
record label of
Yeah.
Mike Jones, Paul Wall, Slim Thug, Don Key, all that. Um, anyway, so got to rep Houston.
Yeah.
You have football. You have the Oilers, who are known for tremendous playoff disappointments forever. No Super Bowls, giant blown leads to the Bills in the playoffs. They had, this run, the Love You Blue with Earl Campbell, and it never really went into anything in the playoffs. Then you lose the Oilers. So Houston, one of the biggest cities in the country, one of the most football-loving cities in the country, gets their football team taken away to Tennessee, to frickin' Nashville. Are you kidding me? So then they get, Nashville. Nashville sucks, as, we're Memphis guys, right?
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of Nashville. I was there for the Texans-Titans game. The hot chicken was good. I think it's a fake city for bachelorette parties. Anyway, moving on.
Yeah.
So they lose their team to Nashville, and then you get the Texans. And what are the Texans known for? Drafting David Carr and having him sacked a million times. And then, eventually they get J.J. Watt, and then J.J. Watt gets hurt all the time, after winning the 3 Defensive Player of the Years.
Sure.
And they're also playoff disappointments. The Texans franchise, who's been around since 2002, have never made it past the second round of the playoffs. They've never gotten to the AFC Championship even, despite the fact that they have had a little run of division wins against the Colts and all that, even against Peyton Manning and Andrew Luck. And so that the Houston football fan is upset that this city that loves football so much has never had a true winner. So that's football. Basketball is difficult to characterize because I think right now the way that basketball looks is they don't get enough respect. James Harden does not get the same superstar respect that's, the LeBron James or Giannis or others, Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, other superstars in the NBA get. So they're also a bit aggrieved where they won 2 championships in 94 and 95 with Hakeem Olajuwon. And those championships are kind of forgotten because they are in the middle of the Jordan dynasty. And so that's, the Rockets are the team that won when Michael Jordan wasn't playing. And that's how they're seen. And so Rockets fans get upset because they believe that those Rockets team could have beaten those Bulls teams. And which I think is a great argument because those Rockets teams were great and they just needed to break through in the West. And you don't know that if Jordan wasn't playing the Rockets in 93 instead of the Suns or the Rockets in 96 instead of the Sonics, that the Rockets wouldn't have won because Hakeem Olajuwon was an elite player in his era and they had this great team put together. So there's basketball. And then baseball, the Astros were not very good forever. They came the same year as the Mets, as the Colt 45s, and then they were kind of blah for however many years, went to the World Series, lost to the White Sox in 2005. And then now the Astros are the most hated team in baseball. And so you have a football-loving city that has a football team that can't win anything. You have a city that has championships in basketball, but are sort of, forgotten or underrated to a degree. And then you have a baseball team that is now the most hated baseball team after capturing their first championship in franchise history the same year, the same month that we have a hurricane that takes out our city. We had this big joyous affair that Astros win the championship right after a hurricane levels Houston, and now that championship is tainted and everyone hates the Astros.
Wow. Yeah, and there is a justification for that hate, even though you are in Houston and you support
To me, it doesn't bother me. I'm not an Astros fan. I'm a Mets fan. I mean,
Yeah.
gigantic Mets fan, as everyone who has ever,
Sure.
seen anything that I ever do. And I just don't think stealing signs electronic, it didn't bother me that much. I don't know if it would. Maybe it would if the Mets had lost in the World Series to the Astros, because the Mets lost the Royals, and I don't like the Royals, but you can't really fault the Royals. Like, the Mets blew that World Series. The Royals their pitchers pitched better than they had. So kudos to them for being better than they were for a series. For Edison Volquez should not be out dueling Matt Harvey in starts, and he did. And that's how baseball goes sometimes. There are pitchers who are not, big time guys that pitch really well in the playoffs, and it just happens. And that's why, I see the Dodger fans here in LA. So the Dodger fans hate the Astros.
Oh, absolutely. Constantly.
Which is it's funny because the Astros are kind of an underdog baseball franchise. They're not the Red Sox. They're not the Yankees. They're not the Dodgers. They're not the Cardinals. They're not this powerhouse franchise that everyone hates. And now everyone hates the Astros.
They are the punching bag, and yeah, wow. In LA, it's hate, and it's just heated.
Which I think LA needs to get over it to a degree, because the Dodgers are not even the most popular team in Los Angeles.
That's true.
If the Lakers do anything in the middle of a Dodgers playoff game, you're doing your Lakers. The Lakers own Los Angeles. That, I don't care. You could be game 7 of the World Series, Dodgers, LeBron will come out and say something. Eyes are on LeBron. Yeah. Squirrel, LeBron, and so I don't want to hear anything from Dodger fans. You guys will switch to watching the Lakers game in 5 seconds.
Wrapping up here with Ari Alexander. Hey, by the way, I don't think that Dodgers fans took too kindly to some of the faux apologies from Houston Astros players. I
will say that the apologies were bad. That was very poorly handled by the whole team, especially by the owner, Jim Crane. That was poorly handled.
Yeah. Ari Alexander not poorly handled. He nailed this interview. We're going to do this again in the future. And thanks so much for coming on, giving us a little bit of a spotlight into your career. And hey, we'll see what happens with these Rockets. We'll see about these Astros. And I'd love to talk more about them in the coming weeks with you.
All right. Thanks, Bryan.